Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to another video. Welcome back to another episode on Beyond the Touchline. This is the post-game week show for game week 22. Once again, the style's going to be a little bit different. We're going to try the takeaway styles again. I think that sounds a little bit better, just talking about a whole game week in general instead of going through each game one by one. We'll see how it goes again. As I said, the response. The last video wasn't too bad, so we're going to see this one if it's still okay, and then we'll see how we're going to push on moving forward. But yeah, drop a like on the video if you guys are enjoying this series, and of course subscribe if any around here. Get discussing in the comments down below your thoughts and your opinions as well. That'd be very much appreciated. But yeah, let's jump right in. So as always, we'll look through the Premier League table first. Once again, the three bottom sides, they're in trouble again, as you can evidently tell. Wolves as well have lost their game as well this morning. So right now, again, in terms of the bottom few, it's getting tighter in terms of the relegation spots once again. But because Everton have managed to pick up a win, that gap between Everton and the bottom three, or bottom four rather, has increased by a little bit over there. Man United, West Ham, Tottenham have all lost their games, which means they are also in some sort of trouble when it comes to the bottom half of the table. Palace have managed to pick up a win, and now they're unbeaten in 5 games. So it's not too bad from Palace. They're pretty good form. Brentford have lost their game. Fulham, Brighton have both won their game finally. Brighton now have won 2 games in a row, which is really good for them after a run of like 7 winless games, something like that. Villa drew as well, which I think arguably wasn't a too bad result for them. Bournemouth did win, which was surprising. We'll talk about that later. Newcastle, the only team in the top 10 to lose their game. So because of that, Newcastle unfortunately lose touch between themselves and the top 4. City have now pushed themselves up to 5th, 2 points behind Chelsea, while 4 points behind both Nottingham and Arsenal, and they're both 6 points behind Liverpool. Right, as for these statistics, now Chris Wood did score, so he's now on 40. Isak unfortunately ends his consecutive goal scoring streak because he didn't score against Bournemouth. That unfortunately meant that, he has ended that streak and he's still on 15 goals. Haaland managed to score 1 against Ipswich, so he's on 17. Salah didn't score any against Brentford, so he's still on 18. As for the assists-wise, the top 5, none of them actually registered an assist, so it stays as it is. Alright, so here were my predictions for game week 22, and as you can evidently tell, I've only predicted the outcome of 5 Premier League games correctly. Now, if I have to look at it, I think Arsenal Villa, I probably could have predicted the result in some way or another. Everton Tottenham, I think that was a little bit of a 50-50 chance. Nottingham Forest and Southampton, I think I predicted a very convincing victory, but you know what happened over there. I thought Man City Ipswich was convincing enough, apparently not. United Brighton, actually, that score was one of the closest ones. Same with Leicester and Fulham, I thought that was really close. But here are the results, so actually not too bad, as I said, 5 results in terms of the outcome. I think I'm getting a 50% here, which is not too shabby at all. But as for the results, Newcastle 1, Bournemouth 4, West Ham 0, Palace 2, Brentford 0, Liverpool 2, Leicester 0, Fulham 2. So 3 2-0 games, 2-0 wins for the away sides back-to-back there. Arsenal and Villa with a 2-2 draw. Nottingham Forest with a slim margin 3-2 win against Southampton. Everton as well with a slim 3-2 win against Tottenham. But finally, Everton managed to win themselves a game, which is great in their perspective. Finally, Everton find themselves picking up a win again. Moyes going to be ecstatic about it, and they obviously need to use that to catapult themselves up if they want to survive in the Prem for the rest of the season and moving into next year as well. Brighton 3, Manchester United 1, Man City 6, Ipswich Town 0, a result that I don't think anybody would have predicted that. And obviously Chelsea 3, Wolves 1. Right, so the first takeaway, Liverpool are incredible. Now, when you look at the game against Brentford, it was so clear that Liverpool were just the better side, right? And for 90 minutes, somehow Brentford have managed to put up their own, to do whatever they can to keep the result at 0-0. To be fair, Brentford had a couple of, I say, decent chances. They weren't as clear-cut as they looked. They weren't as good as the chances they created against City. And ultimately, that meant that, the chances of scoring were a lot slimmer. But Liverpool, they had so many chances in the whole game. They had 37 shots, right? And imagine 37 shots if you've not won a game. I don't exactly think that's 100% on Liverpool to get a result at this point. It's obviously a little bit of luck that play into the game, at that point in time. You've just got to understand that that's how football works sometimes. West Ham, they had 31 shots against Leicester when Ruud first got in charge. And they've only scored 1 goal. And they've lost 3-1. Leicester had a lot fewer shots than that. So ultimately, when you look at it in that perspective, sometimes managers can only ask certain things from their players, but ultimately, it's really just what happens in the game that's gonna happen. There's no way they can control what's happening within the game itself except certain things. And when you're that creative aside to create 37 shots has been incredible. I think their number of shots on target were pretty good as well. So ultimately, that suggests to me that they're a very good side, a fantastic side rather, and they're able to create chances and they're able to get the ball, striking towards goal. That's great. But what's incredible about Liverpool is that even 0-0 to 90th minute, they never gave up. They just kept pushing on. Every single attack they had were extremely lively, and it was just a joy. It was a joy to see how Liverpool just kept continuing, kept continuing, kept continuing, despite Flecken making some really, really good saves in general, despite them knowing that sometimes Brentford can threaten them. They didn't let that disrupt them. They just let themselves continue, let themselves continue, and let themselves continue. We've got to understand that this is actually somehow Liverpool's first Premier League victory of the year, which I mean, we're close to the end of the month already, and this is their first Premier League victory, which means that they've been struggling a little bit, when it comes to getting the Premier League results. Obviously, they're not lost. They've been getting draws. I mean, the draw is Nottingham, for example. They should have won that game as well, but they didn't. Nottingham Forest really held their own there. So that's on Nottingham Forest, doing a very good job. And I wouldn't say Liverpool doing a bad job. But for this one, it's on Liverpool for really just still knocking on the door constantly. But I mean, you've got to respect Darwin Núñez, I guess. Unexpectedly, the hero of the game, essentially, when he scored a 90 plus 1 minute so-called winner at first, before he scored his brace, 3 minutes later. Still brilliant from Liverpool. You've got to respect that. You've got to understand that it's really not easy to keep that mentality straight for 90 minutes, which is obviously something that City couldn't do against Brentford. And I think that's just the difference, That's just essentially the difference. I mean, City were champions last year, don't get me wrong. But this year, clearly, they're not behaving like champions, not playing like champions. And it's quite clear to see, at least for me, that Liverpool have really, really shown themselves here and take things up a level. And to really prove themselves as a side that is really not easy to beat. And that's exactly why they top the table now. That's exactly why they have that points gap to wherever they have. It's not just really about the consistency, but it's about the way that they play football, the mentality they come into the game, and how they act in the game itself. Obviously, you're going to lose games for sure, right? It's very difficult to have, an unbeaten run throughout the entire campaign. It's not like they can. Doing an Arsenal 0-3-0-4, unbeaten 38 games is honestly extremely difficult, and I think it's a feat that will be extremely, extremely tough to reignite that and again to redo and do that sort of thing. But ultimately, what Liverpool have been doing this season, to me at least, has just been impeccable. Even when they lose games, I felt like it's just bound to happen, But of course, if they lose games where it's really crucial when it comes to the title race, then yeah, probably we could say something about it. But ultimately, I think Liverpool have just been incredible this season, as I said multiple times throughout the segment already. You just only can watch them enjoy, and you've got to credit them, give them a round of applause. And honestly, if they don't win the league this year, as I said this many times, and there's nothing I can say. They really need to win the league this year. Right, takeaway number 2. Man United and Tottenham are incredible too. Unfortunately, this is the complete contrast of what incredible is supposed to mean. Now, first of all, I think let's talk about Manchester United, right? Amorim has been in charge of United for 11 games. He's now lost 6 games already, which means he's lost more than half the games in charge at the club. And he acknowledges that the team is terrible. He acknowledges that, the team needs to be better, etc. But he's not going to change his style again. I think people are talking about how he's being a lot similar to Erik ten Hag in that sense, where they're very unreceptive to changes in that sense that they just want to stick to whatever they're doing and they think it's going to work, they think it's going to work, they think it's going to work. Yeah, sometimes there's a glimmer of hope when it works, well, fantastic. But when it doesn't, they just say that, it's still going to work, just give it some time, etc., etc., etc. In that sense, they're very alike in that manner. And it's worrying because I think as a manager, you need to be a lot more adaptive than that. You need to, once you try a couple of games, right? I mean, you've played 11 games, you've lost more than half. I think that suggests to a bare minimum level that you just need to try and switch things up. What you could have done with that group at Sporting isn't necessarily going to work here at Manchester United. They're two different sets of players, two different squads, and you've got to understand and respect the fact that they've both of their different qualities. They have their different strengths, their different weaknesses. You've just got to change the setup. It's something that Amru needs to register in his head, and I don't think he's getting that, which is a problem because clearly in this game as well, it didn't work out. Brighton were constantly knocking on the door, and they were good. Yes, Onana's blunder, that summed the entire game up for Manchester United, but I think that's besides the point. Brighton was still very threatening. In fact, Brighton, as I said, when they were having a winless run for that many games, 78 games, and suddenly now they're 2 wins on the bounce. Yes, the win against Ipswich and now wins against Manchester United, which are two sides which arguably I say are very hard to pick up wins, and Brighton managed to do that, and they've made the game look easy as well. That just shows how bad Manchester United have been already throughout the entirety of the season. If we have a look at the table again, you can see where Man United are. They are in 13th at the moment. Level, so 2 points ahead of Tottenham still somehow. And they've lost 10 Premier League games. They've nearly lost half their Premier League games here, which is crazy to see how bad a team that Manchester United have been this season. And as well, a negative goal difference to their name. Everything has just gone wrong for the team, and despite having a change in manager, which the fans I think were slightly eluded, I guess, in that regard. They were like, oh my god, Amra's going to come in now, he's going to change everything. It's like, because he's doing so well at Sporting, they were expecting the same sort of, results. They were expecting that sort of level again. Past performance does not guarantee future results. I hope that glues into everybody's heads. Just because a very good manager comes in doesn't mean that he's able to adapt to what he has on the table at the club, right? If a club's at crisis and the manager, whatever he tries, is not working out, it's just not going to work out, And I don't exactly think it's always about the manager. I think he has to play a role to a certain extent. But with regards to Manchester United, I think it's such a special case to the point. It's really not just a manager. I think it's really got to do with a bunch of players. We've got to understand, like Jose Mourinho was in that team before. Louis van Gaal was in that team before. You've got who else? David Moyes was in that team before at some point, right? He had a very abysmal tenure as well. He stayed there for a year. But especially talking about Mourinho and Van Gaal, right? I think these two managers are really, really good, especially Jose. And Jose still managed to win trophies with this club when we can't necessarily expect them to, despite them having really bad performances left, right, centre. They still managed to do it. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer still manages to get this team to like second place finishes for like 2 seasons or something like that during his time at Manchester United. These are very credible results that even with a team of such calibre, these managers have still managed to push this team up to a level where they don't really deserve to be there. And last season I think that their worst Premier League finish, 7th, 8th, I think in the league last year. And this year now they're on course to an even worse finish than last year. Is it really got to do with the manager? If I were to put in, let's say Hansi Flick in there, or if I were to put in a really, really good manager like Carlo Ancelotti, would anything have changed? Now, look at Carlo Ancelotti, for example, right? He managed Everton at some point, and you can tell, right? Managers to only get like a top 10 finish with the team. Do you think he's done a bad job? I don't think he has. I think with the squad that he's had, getting a top 10 finish, because after that, look at what Everton have been doing, right? When Rafa came in, that was the start of a downfall, and I don't think it's Rafa's fault in general, again, massively. Like, I don't think Rafa massively contributed to the downfall of Everton. But that's just how the squad is, with Everton ever since Ancelotti, and that's exactly what has been happening. Deitch has done an exceptional job, in my opinion, but still, got the sack at the end of the day. But we just know how good Everton is. But the game against Tottenham, which we'll talk about later, I guess it does suggest some hope in that team. But getting back to Manchester United, right? I think it's poor. Very, very poor for Manchester United. Everything just needs to change. As I said, I'm not talking about transfers anymore. I'm talking about the nitty-gritty bits that you can change behind the scenes. Those need to change. The mentality, the prospects, when you come into the game, right? That sort of things entirely needs to shift. Manchester United cannot allow themselves to just fall into trap after trap after trap again, because this game, I feel, has really summed up the season, where there are moments where they're able to shine, don't get me wrong, but most times it just look terrible and it's not good enough from them. Yeah, things need to change. And as for Tottenham, well, we should talk about that now, right? I completely understand that they have a lot of injuries. I think they are one player away from an entire entire 11 full of injuries, which is sounding crazy to me because, damn, right? I mean, Arsenal have been complaining about injuries, but Tottenham have it worse, in my opinion, right? Now, when I look at the game against Everton, now Everton were 3-0 up at the break and they could have made it 4 into the second half. Everton, I think for the first time in this entire season, they looked extremely lively. It felt like they were playing proper football. It was a joy to watch Everton. But still, they looked very leaky in the defence. And once again, relying on drawn Pickford at times. And obviously, when Richarlison scored at the 90th minute to bring it back to 3-2, worrying signs definitely would have existed. But still, Everton managed to pick up a win. It's first win, obviously, back under David Moyes. We'll see what happens with Everton. I think, as I said, Everton right now, the squad is as good as it gets, essentially. And if they're able to get results, great. But obviously, in this game, I think everything went their way. Dominic Calvert-Lewin finally scored as well, which is great. But yeah, Tottenham, obviously, injuries have managed to hit them massively. But I think the 11 that they put out are still pretty decent. And I think it's Everton. I think at least a draw was expected, right? So I put in a 0-0 draw. I just felt like, yeah, Tottenham are in a stage where struggling massively because of all the injuries that they have. But it's not like the squad is so bad to the point they're not able to pick up results. Yeah, so it's again very, very poor from Tottenham, and they're closer to the relegation spots, to what, the top 10? They are. They're 8 points in the relegation zone and 9 points away from the top 10. That's how bad a season Tottenham have had this season. Despite scoring 45 goals, despite having a positive goal difference, and I've said this before, right? When they win games, they win by massive margins, but when they lose games, they lose by really tiny margins. And because of that, ultimately, the goal difference looks pretty, but the points tally definitely doesn't look pretty. So, poor from Tottenham, as I said, may need to sort things out as well. I mean, injuries, yes, are one thing that can really damage your season, but to damage it in this sort of level when you're a top 6 team of the Premier League in general, to classify you as a big 6, this is just unacceptable. Right, takeaway number 3. Bournemouth are genuinely some dark horse. Now, coming into the game, right, Newcastle and Bournemouth, I did watch that entire game, by the way, and Bournemouth were incredible as well. They were playing fantastically. Really just in awe in general about this game. I absolutely loved whatever I was seeing. Newcastle just didn't have the answers to whatever Bournemouth put at them. Yes, Newcastle did score, but ultimately Bournemouth were just the better team and they deserved to win. And obviously man of the match, Justin Kluivert, probably player of the week as well. Justin Kluivert with a hat-trick. What Bournemouth have done in that game is exceptional, special, and to me at least, it definitely suggests that they're really capable of a lot of things. Again, you look at the Premier League table, they're 7th. They're a point behind Newcastle, 3 points behind the top 4. As I said, we talk about how Newcastle, Bournemouth, Villa, and Nottingham, they've just been exceptional this season in general. But because they've been so good, and sometimes, they do drop points here and there, these clubs, they just yo-yoing a little bit. Obviously, Nottingham Forest are ahead of the rest for sure. But Bournemouth, they are a dark horse, when we talk about how Newcastle managed to pick up so many wins along the way, talk about how inconsistent they are. Somehow, coming into this game, they didn't look like themselves, Newcastle, and Bournemouth were just like having a game of their own. They made Newcastle look like amateurs in some sense because they were just that good, just get calm and collected throughout an entire game. And to me, that's exactly what I want to see from teams like that. Playing real lively football and just really having a game of their life. And Bournemouth have really shown that. And honestly, if they keep it up like this, they really could get into Europe next year. And who knows what they can do moving forward as well. Understand, to me at least, clubs like Chelsea and City, because they aren't at their best, right? Especially City aren't at their best. Anything could happen, right? City could find themselves, like even next game week, they could find themselves as low as 8th again if they lose their game and everyone else below them wins their game. Because the next game, City against Chelsea, that is a huge game as well for both sides. The one to try to crack into the top 4, which sounds crazy when City won 4 Premier Leagues in a row, but that's exactly the situation that City have at their expense. But anyways, crazy from Bournemouth this game. Really close that gap to Newcastle, obviously, and really make the table a lot tighter than it should be. But again, it's testament to how good they've been this season, Bournemouth. And that game against Newcastle, they were just incredible. I again looking forward to see what they can do. Newcastle, they will have to figure out how to react to situations like these. Nottingham Forest have managed to react to this pretty well in general. Is that when I've talked about them, I said when they start losing games, how are they going to react to that? I think Nottingham Forest done exceptionally well to do that. But Newcastle now, they've got to figure out a way again because they don't really want a level of inconsistency to hit them and affect the rest of the Premier League season moving forward. Right, point number 4, takeaway number 4. Arsenal bottling and Nottingham nearly following pursuit. Now, obviously, Arsenal, again, new year, same Arsenal. It's getting a bit frustrating now at this point, I think, when they've lost 2 Premier League titles to Man City, arguably, because they were ahead at some point. And even when Leicester won the Premier League that year, Arsenal bottled as well at the halfway stage of the season, 2 points ahead of Leicester. And again, Arsenal looked really good that year, just bottled towards the end. But this 3 years now, 2 years lost to City, and this year they're going to lose to Liverpool. It honestly hardly looks like it. I think there are many chances to sort of close that gap time and time again. Instead, they're yo-yoing with Nottingham Forest when it comes to picking up wins, picking up draws, picking up defeats, dropping points, etc., or even gaining points. They're yo-yoing with the wrong team here. They're supposed to yo-yo with Liverpool when it comes to trying to fight for something more. They were 2-0 up Arsenal at the 54th minute. Liverpool were 0-0 at the 90th minute. If I were to give you this stat, you would tell me that Liverpool, or rather that 0-0 game, would have had a higher chance of ending up 0-0. Yes, of course, I think there was a chance for Villa to come back to 2-2, but talk about probability. Who would have a higher probability of drawing the game? You would have told me the 90th minute one, for sure, 100%, right? Somehow, Liverpool managed to win 2-0 and Arsenal have managed to draw 2-2. Of course, props to Villa for getting the game back to 2-2. It was incredible. But for Arsenal, this is diabolical from them. This is not just a bad... It's not just a bad game. It was a horrific game. Like, you tell me you've had control for most of the game, and suddenly, bosh, lost it completely. And that's the end of that. It really just it scratches more hits than anything. This is poor, as I said, from Arsenal. I'm very confused why they've been able to do this year after year after year. If they really finish second again this year, I think it's really down to them just not taking the chances, just not capitalizing on moments where they really should be capitalizing on, because clearly they are much better than this. But, you know, again, how can you blame injuries when Tottenham have a lot more of an injury crisis than you? It's really down to you at this point in time, because I think the team's really, really good. Just not been able to perform when it needs to perform. And again, they were at home, you know. It's like City bottling against Brentford, bottling against Feyenoord. It's just exactly the same idea. It's depressing, it's sad, and you just know the team's a lot better than that. But they clearly just didn't perform, so poor from Arsenal for that one. But Nottingham Forest nearly had the same fate this weekend, right? In that sense where, honestly, Southampton, they should have at least picked up a point. They, after scoring the header in the 90th minute, right, and they had another chance, pretty much another replica, Aina off the line. That, I'm telling you right now, was absolutely as good as a goal, right? To save Nottingham from dropping 2 points, that's as good as a goal to me. I think Nottingham Forest, you know, when they're 3-0 up with a break, maybe a little bit complacent, because when you look at the result, 3-2 is just a bit too much and a bit too tight for comfort. And as I said, we know what Nottingham Forest can do. We've seen what they've done this season. And that, to me, is a result that they need to reflect a little bit on. I'm sure Nuno would be like heaving a sigh of relief when the final whistle is blown, because clearly something needs to be better. Still need to fine-tune some things, because, again, a Southampton that has been really struggling this season suddenly sort of came to life in this game in general. I don't think they're doing too bad. It's just that I think they just had a game of 2 different halves. In the first half, they felt like they didn't feel good. But in the second half, they really came to life. They really were threatening Nottingham Forest in many ways. Yes, Nottingham Forest did score another one, but I think that goal should have counted, in my opinion, the Milenkovic goal. Maybe if they scored that, and ultimately, you know, that gap is in the number of goals were like +3 again in Nottingham's favour. Probably Southampton would have attacked as much, but because the deficit was only at 2 goals, that sort of allowed, I see, Southampton to push a little bit more, just take that little risk here and there. yeah, as I said, that it really would have changed the complexity of the game. Again, the landscape of the game would have shifted, had that goal been allowed, which to me, I felt it should have been allowed. But that's not for me to say. The decision has been made on field again. But ultimately, yeah, a bit too tight there for Nottingham. They really need to be a little bit more, um, I wouldn't say perfect, but a little bit more better, a little bit better when it comes to, the execution needs to be a lot more effective than this. So it's a bit worrying, but ultimately didn't suffer the same fate against Arsenal. So that's why I said it nearly followed pursuit. Right, takeaway number 5. The 3 promoted sides could all be relegated again. Now, when I started this series, when I've been doing all these videos, I've always talked about how I feel that aside from Southampton, I feel that Leicester and Ipswich in some ways stood a chance of trying to get themselves up the Premier League table, get themselves out of the relegation zone and not be threatened by that. I said they just need to try. I said they have a team that is probably and arguably capable of doing a lot better and they just need to try their best. Unfortunately, I think that hope, that aspiration that I have of both of them is starting to deplete. It's starting to feel bleak even. Because as much as teams ahead are losing quite a bit, but because the gap is starting to get a little bit sizable, it's starting to get to the point where it's going to be extremely tough to close, even if they want to. Leicester have lost 5 games in a row, and I don't know how many games in a row now. But essentially, ever since the win against West Ham at the very start of Van Nistelrooy's tenure, it's been god awful since then. And as for Ipswich, I mean, yes, they've managed to pick up a win and draw in the last 5 games, but still 3 defeats in 5. And the 2-0 defeat against Brighton and our 6-0 defeat against City. It's getting more and more challenging for Ipswich. At least that's my take on that. It looks like they're going to have to fight with Wolves when it comes to who's going to get relegated. Yeah, Wolves had a great start under Victor Pereira, to be honest. 2 wins and a draw at the start, and now 3 defeats in a row as well. It looks like they're going back to square again. Wolves, like back with Gary O'Neill sort of levels again. So, as I said, it's tight in that regard between the 3 sides at the bottom. But because Leicester have not picked up a point, God knows how long now. Again, I talk about, Cooper getting the sack. Did he deserve the sack? In my opinion, still no, because of how he's done. I think he's done exceptionally well. With the squad that he's had, I think Cooper is a really good manager, so I don't think he deserved the sack. Getting Van Nistelrooy, I don't think it was a bad shot at the start. What he did at Manchester United was really good, but maybe again it was too short a tenure to sort of deduce whether or not he was going to be a very good manager in the long run. And I guess, with now Leicester, a squad that it's going to be really challenging to pick up points. I think it shows that maybe as a manager, he still has a lot to learn, still has a lot to develop. Yeah, but ultimately, I think these 3 teams, I mean, Southampton, they really stood a chance against Nottingham to at least get another point. It's been long gone since they had points, and I'm sure they would have wanted a point desperately, but they didn't get it. So again, tough on Southampton on that regard as well. Yeah, just these 3 teams, unfortunately, is starting to get a lot more bleak. So there's not too much for me to say except they just need to keep on trying. I think, as I said, Ipswich and Leicester, they stand the best chances to get out in terms of points, right? Looking at points tally. But based on what I'm seeing in terms of performances, it's going to be a lot more challenging than it looks. Right, takeaway number 6. I'd just like to flaunt this a little bit, but my takeaway is that it's 6-star City. Now, we've got to understand again, the season that City has been having has just not been good, obviously. And after the 2-2 draw against Brentford, I mean, coming into this game against Ipswich, as much as I predicted a 4-1 win, and only I predicted that because I didn't watch the game against Brentford or the game against Brentford hadn't happened when I was recording that video. For me to predict a 4-1 win against Ipswich would have been very, very optimistic in that sense, where for me to think that we scored this many goals, 4 goals in general, is a little bit too much to ask for. And again, after that draw against Brentford, I think the confidence has sort of dipped a bit. But 6-0, I mean, come on, who would have expected that? I wouldn't have expected that. It's a credible result. I mean, people are saying like, oh my god, against 18th place Ipswich, oh my god, it's just an average game, they should have won, etc. Scoring 6 against them, putting 6 past them is not a surprise. But people don't realise is this team has managed to beat Chelsea, right? we're still ahead of City at this point in time, right? And they're going to face them next week. And you've got to also understand that they've also beaten Tottenham, right? Ipswich, and City have lost to Tottenham 4-0. So again, football is just a crazy world, isn't it? Like, just because of how teams are playing against each other doesn't mean that when, that doesn't necessarily, the projection of how results will go when another team faces another team. Yeah, it's obviously hard to predict. And this game, City were really, really good. They were lively again. It felt like a sort of City that I've been seeing, when they were champions. I really do hope, again, this performance can continue. We clearly need some of these performances back again. De Bruyne was on fire. Doku was on fire. Jeremy Doku and Kevin De Bruyne had a really, really good partnership in this one as well. Same De Bruyne and Foden as well had a really, really good partnership. De Bruyne was a lot more versatile in this game. I felt De Bruyne just had a lot of space to run into, and yeah, the game was just really, really good. So I don't really think I need to say much more. I think if I was even talking this game on its own, I've got nothing to say except City were just perfect in that game in my eyes, and it's clearly a result that he needed. And finally getting a clean sheet, and it does our goal difference a massive favour as well, considering how bad our goal difference has been because we're conceding a lot of goals. So this game is like a little bit of I wouldn't say a makeover, but it's just a game where we've managed to turn its head and turn its head when it comes to how bad a performance has been, make it one really good performance again, and hopefully, I guess I said, we can really kickstart a good run. As I said, the title's out of reach for us for sure, unless something drastic happens. What I care about is that at least we've got to at least minimally finish second this year again. It's possible with that 6-point gap, and knowing how we've been managing to close gaps all the time, it's possible. We just need to dig deep now and just try to win as many games as we can. And yeah, we'll see what happens towards the end of the season, but my confidence with the club is yo-yoing at this point, because sometimes they're doing very well, sometimes they're doing really badly. So very difficult to judge how I feel the club's going to go and how the club's going to perform every time moving forward. But this game, I'm just going to cherish it, and hopefully, against Chelsea, hopefully we always get a positive result as well. Yeah, but there we go, guys. Thank you very, very much for watching this one. Yeah, as I said, drop a like on the video if you guys are enjoying this series, and of course, subscribe if you're new. Get prepared for the next pre-game week show for Game Week 23, but I'll give you guys predictions then. But yeah, that'll be it for me. Thank you guys very much for watching this one. I'll see you guys next time. Until then, goodbye.